guys, so hopefully by now you've started using a wall to kick up on, finding balance using the wall, focusing on those white fingertips, getting those hips over the shoulders, all that good stuff. But I'm sure by now you're starting to feel some soreness, which is completely natural. We're using a lot of muscles. So today I want to just stress the importance of taking frequent breaks and stretching out those areas. It's not healthy for the body to stretch in one direction and not counter that stretch and come back in the other. So I'm going to focus on some of those areas that get the most tension and the most pressure when you're up in a handstand. So if you're starting to feel some shoulder pressure, upper back pressure, a good stretch to do is what we call child's pose. So we're going to start in tabletop. So your knees are going to come under your hips, about hip width apart, and your hands under your shoulders, about shoulder width apart. And then what we're going to do is sit down all the way on our heels. And from here, we're going to walk our hands straight out, only as far as you're comfortable with. You'll start feeling a slight stretch in the shoulder area. But then you're going to focus on dropping the head, pushing the forearms down onto the ground, and then you'll feel a deeper stretch in those shoulders. Now, if you're starting to feel like, okay, this is too deep, it's not comfortable, walk those hands back a little bit, or push those arms back down in your head. If you feel like, okay, it's not deep enough and you want to go a little deeper in your stretch, walk those hands out a little more. Push those arms down, focusing on pulling in the arms, pushing down into the forearms, dropping that head, and taking some breaths here. And then slowly come back up. So that's a really good way to alleviate some of the pressure that can build up in your shoulders. Another place that gets hit pretty hard when we're in handstands are the wrists. So a good way to counter that action is to go ahead and sit any way you like. Do the hands facing you. And just put a little bit of pressure on them. You don't want to put all your weight on them. You don't want to feel any pain, just enough to feel a good stretch. And hold that for a few breaths. And then doing the opposite way. So the tops of your hands on the ground. Again, your fingers are facing you. And pushing down a little. You'll feel this more in your forearm and your wrists and your forearms. Again, don't put too much weight. You don't want to feel any pain, just a good stretch. Take a few breaths there. And then rotating your wrist, just giving them a little break. And then back the other way. So that's a good way to alleviate some of that tension. That area gets hit pretty hard on handstands. Now another area that can get hit pretty hard is your back. It can do some unwanted stretching, get some soreness. You don't want to pull anything and you definitely don't want to get hurt, so stretching it often is a good idea. And a way to do that is what we call cat-cow. So again, we're going to come back to tabletop. So knees under those hips, about hip width apart, and then hands under those shoulders, about shoulder width apart. Now we're going to start with what looks like a cat. So think of a cat stretching, how their back goes pretty high. So how you're going to get that is, think about bringing that pelvic bone in, pushing through the hands, dropping the head, lifting the back. So tailbone is coming in, pushing through the hands, dropping the head, lifting the back. Take a few breaths. Okay, and then cow. Your pelvic bone is going to come out. Your head is going to come through, pushing as far as is comfortable. Hold that for a few breaths. And then back to cat. So pelvic bone comes in, head drops down, pushing through those hands. and then back to cow. So pelvic bone out, head comes through, up, hold for as long as comfortable. Take a few breaths. Then come back to tabletop and come down. So those are a few good stretches that I like, especially to help alleviate some stress and tension in those areas that seem to find the most tension when we're up in handstand. So I hope that helped you. Again, I recommend taking frequent breaks, doing these stretches. If you ever start to feel pain or soreness, take a break, take a rest, come back to it later. You don't have to tackle this obstacle now. You'll get there, you'll find that balance, but don't hurt your body along the way. So I hope those stretches help you, and we'll be back to tips and tricks next time.